Okay, welcome back. We are COMP308 in the winter 2019 semester, and it's week 6, part 1 of our broadcast. We're going to be talking about authentication with Passport today, which we should have done kind of last week. We kind of started talking about it, but we couldn't finish it. We didn't have time, so we're going to do it this week. A couple of administrative items before we continue. Your assignment 1 is due tonight, right? So that's something I should kind of talk about. It's going to be a project, the assignment 1, that we're going to be building on. So it's super important you get it done. Otherwise, the other ones you'll have more of a problem because you're going to have to refinish it anyway because we're going to add to it. Okay, so that's something that is due tonight at midnight. I know some people have asked me for extensions because of workload and all that kind of stuff. Talk to me afterwards or send me a direct message. It's on a case-by-case basis depending on what your problem is. Typically, I don't allow extensions, typically, all right? Especially since I've given you like weeks to do this. Like, it's not like it's something that I gave you yesterday. But again, everyone's got a different scenario. I don't want to also cause you a lot of stress. This shouldn't be causing you too much stress. It should be good practice for your test that's happening next week. So next week, a reminder, we will be having a test during your regular time. So that means for the first class or section 1, it should happen at 8:30 in the morning. If you belong to section 1, please attend section 1 for your test. And section 2, that'll happen exactly at 1:30. So you guys start at 1:30. You'll go from 1:30 to 3:30. And then we'll have a small break and we'll do the rest. We'll start off with Angular next week. Chances are I was going to do it today, but after I worked with the first group and I tried to do authentication with them, there's just too much to do and not a lot of time. And I think it's going to be a rush to do Angular all at once. I don't mind if we're a little bit behind. We'll catch up with everybody else, like I said. But I'd rather do this correct than rush through this portion and everything else. Things that are going to be on the test for next week, just to note. Next week, we'll be having a test on Node, Express, and Mongo. So there'll be no Angular component. And I will not ask you to authenticate next week. So there won't be an authentication piece to next week's test because it's not fair. I'm showing you how to authenticate today, and then I'm getting you to authenticate next week. It's too much. I may have a portion that asks you to do Heroku. I will have 100% a portion that asks you to put things up on GitHub. GitHub is a requirement. So please, you must know that, how to do that. In terms of our what I'm going to give you a whole project. I'm not going to ask you to start things from scratch or anything like that. I'll give you a project similar to what we've seen already. So one that I've already given you, and then you're going to move from there. Yes, you had a question.
If you use MATLAB for Heroku parts, it would work because of the 5 here. And then have access to it. Use it locally.
You're talking about if you use MLab locally, it won't work, right?
It won't work here because it's the file mode blocking us.
Yes, we talked about that when we were doing MLab. So I won't be using MLab. I'll be using a local server. That's one thing you need to set up. So if you don't have a local server on your machine, like if you can't run Mongo somehow, please, before next week, make sure you have this on your machine, whether it's the machine at school or the machine in front of, like the machine that you're taking home, your laptop. You must have Git installed. You must have your machine ready to go. So it's your responsibility to have your machine ready to go with Node, Git, all the NPM modules that we've talked about so far, NodeMon for sure, all those kinds of things. And Mongo has to be set up on your machine locally, right? If one of those things is not done, you can't set up Mongo, you don't do Git, then NPM's not working, you're going to have a problem. And I can't take care of that for you next week because you have a limited time. And even if I try and fix it, and I will try and fix it for you next week, I'll help you, just in case you have like actual technical issues, it's still going to eat your time. And your time is going to be over. That's not going to help you to do this. Make sure you're ready to go, okay? Next week, you'll have access to everything. You'll have access to your code, my code. You'll have access to the internet. You can Google. The only thing you can't do is watch videos next week. We'll not allow that. And you won't be able to message yourself or anybody else, okay? So no messaging apps online. You're not allowed to use Discord, Slack, or anything else to message. You have to turn all that stuff off. But otherwise, the sky's the limit. Do what you want to do. On that though, I'm going to give you an assignment, a little in-class assignment equivalent. That's what it is. That's the test. It's a practical assignment that you're going to do on your own. You have no time. Even if you had access to Google, Me's, Sam or God, it doesn't matter, right? It's not enough time. Well, maybe God, but that's only because if you really had access to that, right? But I've never seen anybody have access to that kind of level of power, right? So, but if you do, all the power to you, as they say. Maybe share some with me. But at the end of the day, what I mean is, please be aware that, you have something that we're going to test you on based on what you've already done. I'm not going to test you on things you haven't done. So I'm not going to ask you for something that is new. There's no net new anything next week. It's just take a project, modify it with what I've asked you to modify, and then, produce something, whatever that something is going to be, an application that works. It should totally take 2 hours max. It shouldn't take, 5 hours to do next week. I'm not going to let you run past the 2 hour mark. So once the 2 hour mark is done, so that means if you come in for your section at 1:30, you have until 3:30. When 3:30 is done, the test is over, right? That's how it's going to run. There's no going overtime or anything like that, okay? Questions around the test next week. Questions around the assignment tonight. Do the assignment. The assignment will help you for next week, okay? That's really important to do because basically what your assignment is going to be preparing you for next week, right? That's what it is. There will not be an exercise today. I'm not going to give you an exercise to do for authentication because authentication will take us the entire time that we're here. I was working on with the other group and we barely had enough time to finish. So again, going back to what we said, and you'll see this today when we start authentication, there is no way I could have fit authentication like last week and combined with full CREP. There's just too many details, and that's the problem. The details is what kills you. All right, so let's start this off. So first of all, we're working with a project starting off from the thing we did last week. So if you please go to, if you haven't done this already, if you go to github.com/Centennial, this is where we're starting off with. We're starting with a project last week, which is COMP308 W2019 Lesson 5B for you guys. That's the project we started off with last week. And I'm just going to pull that off. So 5B, I've already done 6A, but I'm just going to get you guys to do it again. Fortnite is updated. Copy paste. So there's 5B is going to go to 6B. I'm going to set up a brand new project for you guys to follow, right? And again, you'll have access to all this stuff next week. Please use the proper project. All right. So next week, if you're going to look at stuff like code, your code, my code, whatever, if it doesn't include authentication, don't look at that project. Look at a project that does not include authentication, like this one, 5B. 5B last week didn't have authentication. So if I'm asking you to do something for your test next week, don't look at that one, 6B, because 6B is going to include authentication, which means it's going to be different. It's going to screw you up. All right, so please don't do that. All right, so here's 5B. I'm just changing this to 6B just so we can play together. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to bring up Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to drag and drop 6B into VS Code. There it is. I'm also going to redo a couple of things. Package.json, I'm going to change this to 6B instead of 5B. I'm going to also change these ones here, these references here, just for completeness. Not really, because we need them. We're not using this stuff. So everything says 6B now. I'm going to save this thing. And I also want to, I'm going to press Control backtick like we've done before. I'm going to remove the remote. So it's going to be get remote, remove origin, because I want to get rid of the origin remote. We're going to add a brand new remote in because we're going to create a new repository, right? So we're going to go back to GitHub, and I'm going to click on new, and it's COMP308-W2019-Lesson 6B. And Lesson 6B is going to create a new container, a Git container, and I'm just going to grab these last two lines of code here. I'm going to copy them, go back to VS Code, and right-click if you're a PC guy or girl, and enter. Otherwise, you can press Command C, Command V on a Mac, and it'll be like Control C, Control V on a Windows machine. I'm good. I've created my new repository. I'm going to clear the screen now, and we're ready to go. One thing I always like to check, I want to start with NodeMon, right? So here I'm going to just type NodeMon to test our project. You should see some little warning like this that comes up and connected to NodeMon, to Mongo. That means that I'm running MongoDB in the background. Remember that MongoDB is running here. You must have a Mongo server running, and especially for next week, like I said. Okay, so my MongoDB server is running, and I also have a little Mongo window, which I have here. This is my Mongo window. Now, what I did was I did show DBS. We're going to be using the test server for this example, right? So again, you can, if you don't have test server, you can make it, but the test server is here. If I go to use test, you can see that I switched the test database. I can say db dot, and again, we have, let's do show collections. So we have our first collection. We can say db.first.find.pretty. And we can see that in that collection, we have a few users that we're seeing here. These are our contacts, a few contacts, right, in our database. So that's what that's the database we're using right now. Okay, cool. Let's test and see if our website's still up. So we're going to go to, first of all, you can see that GitHub has started a new project. And if I go to localhost/3000, this is the website we have right now. We have a home, about, products, services, contact page. If I click the contact list, I see the contact list. Okay, you should be up. Or does anyone not have this or is having trouble? Guys, this is the level of speed that I want you guys to be at for next week. Because next week, when I give you your project, you download it, you install it, you run it with NodeMon, and you're good to go. If you can't do that next week and you're stuck on MongoDB, if you're stuck on, making your project work and all that kind of stuff, it's going to slow you down. I will help you, but it's still going to slow you down no matter what I do. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It's going to be extra time that you can do better on your test, right? So please make sure your machine is configured properly. If you don't have access to a machine because you're using the computer in front of you at the lab, it might be a good idea to come in earlier that week, check out that it's working, test your stuff out, make sure you're sitting at the same spot maybe as last time, those kind of things, because it's going to slow you down if you have to sit somewhere else. Okay, what we're doing today is we're adding authentication, and we're using a couple of things. We're using Passport.js. So if you use Passport.js, there is a link for Passport.js. This is it. I kind of shared this with you before, but I'm going to put this up on Slack. So let's go to Slack. So here is Slack General. And I'm just going to make this a little bigger. Here it is. So that's the module we're going to be using for next week, for today, for authentication. We're also going to be using something called Passport Local. So there's two. There's this one, and there's also, actually, there's three. Passport-Local. Passport-Local is actually another project that's based off of Passport, right? So if I look up Passport Local, no, not that one. Well, it kind of is that one, but it's not that one. Right, you need kind of like the local strategy. That's what it is. But Passport Local Mongoose is also something we're going to use. Passport Local Mongoose, which is another project that is something we're using. I'm trying to figure if there's a link that I can give you for the NPM module that you can look at for reference. NPM, Tom, NPM, this one. Yeah, there it is. Passport Local module. So Passport Local Mongoose is the NPM module that I'm going to be using for us personally. I think it's a good module. It also does some really cool authentication stuff for us to help us hash our passwords and so on. It's going to save us a little bit of time. I prefer this one over the regular Passport Local. All right, so I'm going to just drop this into here as well. This is for documentation purposes for this one. Okay, so those are the two we're primarily using. We're also using something called Connect Flash today. So there's about 5 packages we're going to use. So let's look at Connect Flash. Actually, I'll try and search it out first. Connect Flash. And Connect Flash, looks like there's another one. Connect Flash Plus. Connect Flash NPM. I don't know why I'm typing in. There we go. So Connect Flash is actually a little module that helps us use Flash messages, right, as an example. And we're going to be talking about this. So I'm going to put this link again on your Slack so we can see how this works. We'll talk about that a little bit. There's Connect Flash. And there's going to be something called Express Session. Session npm. There it is. An Express Session is also something that we have to tap into because we're going to be using cookie-oriented security, again, with stuff that we're going to use. So these 3 modules primarily plus Passport itself. So Passport, Passport Local Mongoose, Connect Flash, and Express Session, right? So, and this is all for authentication, right? Now, each one of these things has a very interesting uses and documentation that we will only be able to scratch the surface of today, all right? So I know there's gonna be lots of questions after this, and this is why I'm not testing you on this next week, because this will take us 4 hours to run through. I'm not joking. And there'll be tons of questions at the end. I'm sure you'll have, in your mind, you'll be like, but how does this work? And how does this connect? And how does this link to this? And how do I do this? And I won't be able to answer all of that today. Just won't be time, chances are. All right, so yeah. Authentication security in general is a big topic. And like I said to you before, one of the challenges with running security is using somebody else's security technique instead of a local strategy, which we're going to be employing today, using OAuth, which allows us to use a strategy that uses things like Google or Facebook or GitHub or somebody else's security protocols as opposed to our own, right? Today, we're going to be talking about local access, local authentication, which is the most common, actually. All right, so I'm going to go to my server here. And remember last week, what we did, just to recall, I broke up our project into server. We put everything inside of server, and we also have a public section. Public really hasn't changed, but server has changed to having controllers and routes that are separated. Okay, we've also put in our app.js inside of our config folder. All right, that we did that last week. So if you weren't here last week, or if you didn't watch the video, please go back to that video, watch that video from last week, lesson 5, and it'll talk about how to do this, how to set this up. It's usually in the last part of what we recorded last week. Okay, so that's where it is. So in app.js, this is where all the fun starts. We're going to start doing things in here. We're not modifying server.js, but I'm going to start with this. So here's the things we need. We need to set up and configure Passport, Passport Local Mongoose, login for display the login page, process the login page. That's the second route. We're going to register, actually display the register page, process the register page. That's 4 routes so far. And log out. That's 5 routes so far. And I'm not even talking about user processing or password resetting, which could be other pages. Okay? There's many, many things we can do with authentication and security, and there's never, never, ever enough time to do it in one session. Truly, this should even be 2 weeks, what I'm doing today in 1 week. So we have to do all those things. We have to create both the views, all the views. We need 4 views, or sorry, 2 views, 5 routes, a bunch of configuration. We have to modify the existing routes. We have to modify my navigation bar to show that the user's logged in or not, and log in and log out options, right? We have to do all those things. That's the volume of work we have to do, and we only have 4 hours. It sounds like a lot of time. Truly it does, but it really is not, right? So please bear with me. This is a kind of a bit of a cram or kind of like a crash course on security in one day. And it's a lot. And actually, we're not even talking about security. We're just talking about components. All right, so let's talk about this from the beginning. So first, we want to go into our app.js page. Again, the app.js page we're accessing is inside of a config folder inside app.js. And we're going to start off with authentication modules. But first, we have to install them. So here's all the modules we have to install. I'm going to go to, so control backtick to open up my terminal window. I want to start off a new terminal window, and I'm going to install everything. So here's npm install. Here's the first module. I want to call it express-session, the first module. I'm also going to install, I'm going to install them all at once, okay? So that's what we do. We express session, and then we do passport, then passport -local, and then passport -local -mongoose, and then connect flash. Those are all the ones we want. And of course, we're going to put --save at the end of all that. I'll leave this up for you so you can see it. So again, install, express session, passport local, mongoose. Okay, those are all the ones we want. Are you with me? And I press enter. All right, enter. If you typed everything correctly, it's going to install all those things, right? You're going to get to this. Now, next. npm install. Let's type all the typings. We need all those typings as well. So first we install the modules, and now we need all the type definition files to help us code more easily, if you will. So we need, again, express express session @types / passport @types passport -local @types passport local -mongoose and @types connect -flash. So why this? We talked about this before. These are development dependencies to help us. We're actually leveraging TypeScript. We're leveraging it. We're not actually using TypeScript. God, can you imagine that? Using TypeScript throughout this entire time and making TS modules, transpiling from TypeScript to JavaScript, making sure that's okay. We're not even there yet, right? We're going to wait to use TypeScript again when we hit Angular, which is where we need TypeScript right now. In a perfect world, I would be using TypeScript for the entire process, because otherwise, if we don't, then you'll never use it. Okay. All right. So if you can see this npm install @types express session @types passport @types passport local. All these @types are type definition libraries that have been created by other people in the community to support the Node packages that we're downloading. Okay. And I'm using --save -deb because they're not project dependencies. They are developer dependencies just to help you develop. All right. Enter. If I did everything right, you'll have all these types like this installed. Okay. And then we're going to move on. Are you with me?
So is this 404 not found types passport at the late?
I'm not saying at latest. So I will leave you do it. I will put it, I'm going to put this up on GitHub in a second, so you can type this out. All right. So now once we have this, once we have all that typed in, we know all of our inside of our node modules now. We have all that stuff. We have all the @types in one place. These are all the @types, right? And we also have inside of here, you can see that we have all the other modules here, Express, and we look at Express Session. We just downloaded Express Session. We also downloaded Passport local mongoose, Passport Strategy, and all the other ones that are included in @types. Okay, so pretty cool. All right, any questions around what we just did? So just regular stuff that we've done before is what we've done so far. Okay, now we need to use this stuff. So let's set up the way it's going to be done. So again, after logger, just after we say where it says logger is equal to Morgan, I'm going to configure modules or install modules for authentication. And I'm also just up here, these are all the modules for the web server, or the node, we'll call this a node server. Actually, this is node for Node and Express, really is what it is, for Node and Express. Those are these modules are, right? Up here. But these ones are, the ones I'm going to put in now are the modules we need for authentication. So we need a new module called, we're making an object called session where we're going to require, again, express-session. We're going to use express session because, again, it's going to help us with using cookies, cookie-based authentication. We're going to use passport, and we're going to say that we're requiring passports. We're also going to say that passport local is equal require passport local. You can see they're all grayed out right now because they're not being used. And we're also going to say that our local strategy, to make a little alias, local strategy is actually going to be passport local. Passport local, that's our local strategy, dot strategy. So that's the strategy we're going to use. Passport local strategy. Really what we're doing is local strategy is actually a class, a reference to a class strategy, which is part of the passport local module. We're also going to say that flash is equal to require. We're going to get that working later. Connect-flash. And that's going to help us display errors and that kind of thing. Okay. Are you with me? This is the first part of the setup. This is just, hey, let's connect our modules to our app.js. That's the first part. Okay. And you can see that we're using 5 modules. Should be okay for this thing. Single quote and double quote is the question that was asked. All right, so are you with me on this? Are we good? Let's move on to the next piece. So once we've done this, we've actually loaded in the modules. But what we want to do here is we want to start configuring some of the stuff here further down. So we're going to go to a space which is just below where we're using our static routes right here. So around line 44 in my code, probably around the same for you. Just before we do the index router and the contact router, I'm going to start using some other things. So we're going to set up our session, express session. And the way we do that is we're going to say app.use, and we're going to use something called session. Remember, because we just configured that. And what we're going to do here is inside of our session object, we're going to configure a couple of things. One is a secret, which we're just going to call some secret. This is usually going to help us with our hash for some of the stuff we're doing, as well as other things. We're going to go into this in a second. I'm going to go to the documentation. We're also going to say save on initialize for now is true, as well as resave is true. And those things can be modified, as you're going to see later on. Actually, I'll show you the documentation now. We really should turn these to false, and we'll talk about why in a second. But let's go into that and talk about it. So if I go to Express Session, here's the API for that. I put this on your Slack. So Express Session, if you scroll down, it talks about configuring it. So if I scroll down, you can see that it has a secret and resave. Notice the save is false and save on initialize here is true. Talk about that. Let's talk about these things as we move down. Here's resave. It says forces the session to be saved back to the session store, even if the session was never modified during the request, right? Depending on your store, this may be necessary, but it can also create race conditions. And I don't have a lot of time to talk about this, but it says where a client makes two parallel requests to your server and changes made to the session in one request may get overwritten with the other requests. So imagine if we're logging in at the same time. I have two sessions and I'm logging into two different web servers, or sorry, the same web server twice with two different computers. Or I just have two different tabs on the browser or something. And I'm modifying, one of them at the same time. I'm logging into one and I'm logging out of the other at the same time, right? It creates something called a race condition where I'm trying to do multiple requests at the same time. And this is okay for log in, log out. But what if I want to edit one thing and update the other one and delete the same thing that I'm editing? That could create a server problem because I'm trying to edit something that's already been deleted, but it's being deleted at the same time I'm trying to edit it, right? So it's called race conditions. So resave. So the default value is true, but using the default has been deprecated. They recommend using it to false. So resave should be false, right? And I'm going to show you what that looks like when we do. We're going to start with true, and we're going to go to false later if we have time. Save uninitialized. So this is the other one. So I said, so this is save, resave is true. It should be false because it's been deprecated. It's not good. And save uninitialized, it says, forces a session that is uninitialized to be saved to the store. And this is the session store, which is like a session variable. It's a global variable that lives in your browser inside the cookie. Session is uninitialized when it is not new, when it's new but not modified. Choosing false is useful for implementing login sessions, which is what we're doing, right? Reducing server storage usage or complying with laws that require permission before setting a cookie. Choosing false will also help with race conditions where a client makes multiple parallel requests without a session. Guys, this is why both should be false. All right. So I started it true, but really both of these things should be false. Okay. I want to explain these things so that way you know what this thing is. When we start talking about authentication, this is one of those things we should know about. The other thing is that secret. This is a required option. And this is a secret used to sign the session ID cookie. So each cookie that's being used to keep track of your session, which is a global parameter, it signs this so that it's almost like it creates a signing hash, if you will. And you can have multiple ones. It says you can use either a string or an array of multiple secrets. If an array is used, only the first element will be used to sign the session ID, while all the other elements will be considered when verifying the signature in requests. Now, I don't care about that. So I just need something to be able to sign the key, and you can use whatever you want. Okay. Typically, we try and hide that secret session, right? We're not hiding anything, right? Because we're just like for school. But these two must be false, like we talked about. Otherwise, you can cause yourself some issues. All right, so once we've done this, we want to start configuring or initializing Passport and Flash. So this is where we initialize Passport. And Passport looks like this. Well, first of all, let's initialize Flash. Here, we'll initialize Flash. So Flash is our little Flash messages. So what Connect Flash does is, let's suppose I have a login page and you try and log in, but you fail to log in. Okay. Well, I want to update the page with a message. But in order for me to update the page, I need to refresh it, right? A lot of times. For me to refresh the page, you haven't logged in yet, so there's no message, so it doesn't show the message. So it's like I'm trying to update a page that's already been attempted, but I can't do that because it needs to be live, and if you refresh the page, it won't be attempted anymore. It resets everything, right? So what Connect Flash does is it allows you to do almost like a two-way data binding kind of thing with the page where if you come up with an error, it'll reload the page with the Flash message that's inside of it saying, hey, man, you messed up. You put the wrong username or password in there, and it won't cause a problem. Same thing with registration. We use it for registration pages where you try and register the same user ID that's already been registered, right? And if you fail to log in for one reason or another. So that's why it's really useful. So we're going to say that app.use, and we're going to just say Flash. Okay. And then we're going to initialize, I'll bring this up a little bit so you can see it. And then we're going to initialize Passport. We're going to say that app.use, we're going to start with passport.initialize. And we're also going to say app.use passport.session. So we're going to use sessions. There's different ways of initializing passport. We need to do these things. So this basically kicks off full action passport. Okay, so passport again is our way of connecting or authenticating. We're actually creating an authentication object that we can connect to. And then we need to do a passport user configuration. But remember, this is the other thing we have to change. Remember, we talked about this. I need a user model. I don't have a user model, my friends. How do I use a model that I don't have? So let me do a little bit of pseudocode. So I need to create a user model. I need that. I also, I need to, when I'm creating a user model, I need to implement a user, authentication strategy. Even though I've defined it, I've installed it, I need to use it, right? And then I need to serialize and deserialize. Deserialize. What the heck? Oh, no, Siri, I don't need you, Siri. I need to serialize and deserialize the user information. Serialize and deserialize the user info, right? And that includes things like passwords, primarily passwords, actually. So anyone understand what serializing and deserializing is? What does that mean? When I use the word serialize in your mind, what does that mean to you? Serialize and deserialize. Yes. Huh? Kind of a serial key. What else? What were you saying?
Binaries.
Someone said, wait, binary. I'm hearing binary. Yes, it is.
Most of computer, the binary is converted to readable data.
Beautiful. So it's binary conversion. So what it does is this. It goes, so imagine if I had a bunch of variables, right? And by the way, we do this in C++ a lot when it comes to binary write. If I want to write binary files, I convert my classes or objects or variables or whatever into binary, store them inside of a file as a binary file, and then when I load them back in, I have to deserialize them. So the process of serialization converts things like variables that we have as strings or integers or whatever into binary data, right? And so it's just a bunch of ones and zeros in a certain order, in a pattern, right? So for example, if I have an integer and a string and I put them as binary, then the integer converted to binary is first and then the string next to it, right? And then if I want to convert back, I've got to read the first bit, put it into an integer, and take the second bit, convert it from binary into a string. And now I have both variables again. That's the process of deserializing, if you will. Similar to this, we're converting things to binary, usually or a hash in this case, the password. So we're hashing the password and then decrypting or unencrypting the password and the user information. So encrypting and decrypting. So we need to be able to do all that. And we can't do any of that without a user model. So guess what? We have to pause and we have to go back into models and we have to think about creating a model for our user. We had a model for our contact. This is our contact model. And if you notice what we did was we accessed Mongoose and we created a schema for our contact. We accessed the first collection and then we created our contact model that we can use to store our contacts, right? Similarly, we need to create a user. So new file. We're going to call this user.js. And we have to interrupt ourselves a little bit here because, and we're going to do this a bunch of times because one thing relates to another thing, which relates to another thing, and it's like they all point to each other. And if you don't have this right, then it won't look right. We're also going to do something a little bit different in terms of, so these are all, I'm going to require all the modules for our user model. One of the first modules we need is Mongoose, of course, right? So Mongoose is equal to require Mongoose. Okay. And the other one is passport local mongoose. And that's the first time we're using it. That's our new strategy for encrypting, decrypting, where we're going to say passport dash local mongoose. Need that part. Those are the two modules we need to make our new user. I also need to create a user schema, which we saw before, like context schema. And we're going to say that that's equal to a mongoose schema. A mongoose schema. And again, mongoose schema is a parameterized class. This is using a factory. We're using factory pattern to create a brand new user, right? We're defining what that user looks like. Now, last time what we did with our contact is we used the simplified property definitions. This time we're going to use a more complex version of this. It's exactly the same, but we're going to actually be more specific. And the way to do that is something that looks like this. Username. And then we use a curly brace to define the username itself, where we say the type, which is string. We're just breaking it down. Our default value, which is nothing. We're initializing it. We're also going to trim it. So, for example, if I enter a username that has, I don't know, Tom and then space, do we want to store the space? No. So we trim that. How about space Tom? We don't want that, so we trim that, right? So we don't want to have any spaces. Or if I say Tom, space, and something else, we trim anything past the space, right? So that's what trimming does. And we also want to say it's required, and we're going to say a message that username is required. We're going to put that in there, all right? So that's kind of a more, it's like doing this. It's like doing first name with a string, but actually we're being more specific, and we're parameterizing each property now, not just the actual class itself. Okay. Okay, we're going to define a password, but we're not going to use it. And I'm going to explain this in a second. Let's define what a password would look like. So here's the password. I ran into this this morning, and I was like, I had forgotten how this works. Where my type is string, and my default, I don't know, get ready to stop me, guys, because I think you guys are typing, but you guys aren't thinking for a second. So why would this be bad? Why can't I do this? This is a clear text password, right? If I save this inside my database, everyone's going to see the passwords for everybody else. I can't use this. This is no good. And Passport Local Mongoose helps us with this because it creates a hash, salting and hashing, which avoids this whole thing altogether. So normally we define a password as part of our user schema, but right now, let's just comment it out. This isn't necessary. It's not necessary because Passport Local Mongoose allows us to encrypt as a hash. So this is taken out because password will be encrypted by Passport Local Mongoose. Okay, so this is what normally we'd have this. Okay, in a more primitive system, you would see that, right? You'd see like clear text password. We don't use that anymore. We do need an email, however. So I'm going to use an email property. So email is definitely something we want to do. Sometimes we use email as a username. Why is that a good practice, do you think? Anybody? We're talking basic security. More unique? Yeah, I would say probably unique. I don't think two emails are the same. Can't have two emails the same. It's easier to identify. Like I know that user is someone is, the user. Sometimes we check both. Username and password must be unique together, the combination. We're not anywhere near that kind of level of sophistication for this, what we're doing here, okay? So don't think by any means we're going to be sophisticated. We're not even going to check if passwords match. I mean, I'm talking about that. We have no time for that. Normally what we do is we would check to see if the passwords match with front-end validation data. We have no time for that. So type is a string. Wow, it's getting away with me here. Default is, again, this empty string. Trim, again, is true. And required, of course it's required. We're going to say that the required message is email is required. Okay, so that's kind of an email. We're also going to ask for email for the user. We're going to also have a display name. Here's a display name. And my display name is going to help create a name that we can use, not just the username or email address, but a display name that the user selects, like Tom, as opposed to, you know, Funky Rocket at, you know, example.com or something weird, right? I don't know. I made that up. I don't know where I got that, by the way. And then string, and then the default would be this value, an empty string. So you see they're all strings. We're also trimming this one just in case they add extra spaces or anything else. And then we're going to say required. These are all required. And we're going to say something like display name is required. So display name. Okay, cool. We're also going to have a couple things here. We're going to have a created property when this thing was created. So the type is going to actually be a date. And the default value for this is going to be date.now, which means that it's going to be generated for you as opposed to it being calculated. The other thing is that we also want to have, just in case we choose to create an updated, to be able to update user data, we're going to have an updated field as well, where we're going to say that the type is a date and the default is date.now. So we want to keep track of both when it was created, the user was created, and when it was updated. This might be good even for a contact list, you know? So when the contact list is created, we you know, put it into place. When it's updated, we put that into place as well. So that way we can see those things. All right, and what we want to do here before we finish is we want to specify in our user schema that the collection that we're using is the users collection. Users collection, yeah. And maybe it'd be really good if we were to format this whole thing in a second, because it bugs me how it looks right now. So again, to format, Control A, and we can right click and format documents, which aligns everything nicely, right? Are you with me? All right, next. We're going to configure some options. Configure options, and we're going to do that for the user schema or the user schema. There's many, 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 many options. I don't know if I can say that again. Many, many, many. One of them is we're going to say that options, let's call it options for now. The only options that I care about are going to be the missing password error option. And we're going to say that we can type in wrong or missing password. Okay. Now we're going to talk about this. Then we're going to say that the user schema dot plugin, going to plug in this new module, which is the Passport Local Mongoose module. We're going to plug that into the user schema and pass along the options we just defined. Okay, so what the heck is this? Well, user schema comes from Mongoose, right? So Mongoose is saying, hey, Mongoose, that's cool. I want to plug in something to connect to the database, something called Passport Local Mongoose, which is an NPM module that adds functionality. It almost like extends the user schema class to allow me additional functionality to connect to the database for authentication reasons. Okay, and then I'm going to do a module .exports, and we're going to create a user object, and the user object is going to equal to mongoose model. We're going to pass in keyword user as the user model, and we're going to use this user schema, which is very similar but different to what we did earlier with contact. Contact actually looked like this. Module exports mongoose model, right? Well, there wasn't any variable or property we assigned. Remember how module exports work. If I assign a property, I create the property. So if I say module.exports.user, means guess what? I'm creating a property called user that I can access outside of the module by referencing the module itself. Okay, the user module. Makes sense? Yes? If it doesn't make sense, think about this as JavaScript. Any kind of JavaScript object, if I assign a property, I create the property. And then people hate that because they're like, wait a minute. I don't have to say that, well, let users equal to a property somehow, and then take users and attach it somehow to the module. There's no way of doing that. So this is the way we do it. I'll go back to my app.js now. We're done with our user model. We're pretty good. In fact, this is a great place to put this up on GitHub to say that we've created our user model. So we'll say created user model. And we're not quite done. I'm just going to put this up on GitHub so you have steps. So here's where I created my user model. And now here's where I'm updating my configuration in my app.js. So again, in my app.js, we were waiting for us to do this because we couldn't complete the app.js configuration because we needed a user model. And now we have one, right? So we can configure the rest of it. So where it says create a user model, what we're going to do is on line 62 or thereabouts, I'm going to say that let user model equal to, it really doesn't matter. We're going to require this models/user. All right, so it has to be the right path, please. .. slash, because it's going up one level. Because we're inside of our config folder, we're going up to the server folder and inside the models folder. So it's actually server models user. And so we're getting a reference to the user model this way. And then we're going to create I want to show you this as well. What we can do is we can create an alias for this by doing something like this. We can say that, well, let's user equal to, this is an alias, equal to the user model dot user. So that's like saying, I don't feel like typing user model dot user. I just feel like saying user, right? So I'm making a alias for it, a shortcut, if you will. So user is actually pointing to user model dot user. We could do that in other places too, but this was probably somewhere we're going to use it multiple times, and that's why it's being used. Okay, so once we've got our user, what we can say is that we want to create a strategy. So we're going to say passport.use. And we're going to pass in the user strategy. We're going to say user.create strategy. And what create strategy does is it creates the strategy we've chosen, which in our case is the local strategy. Not just any local strategy, the local mongoose, passport local mongoose strategy. Local strategy that we're going to be using, which is local authentication. Now that we have this, we're going to finish it off by saying, hey, passport, let's serialize our user. And we're going to serialize our user by passing in the user.serialize user, a reference to the serialize user method that's built into our user model. And we're also going to deserialize our user. You can see that I'm getting code hinting here. And we're going to say deserialize user. Now, it's kind of like, it'd be nice if we just can do it without using this weird syntax where, hey, passport, serialize user, that should be enough, right? But the reason why we have to do it this way is because passport doesn't know anything about the user. Passport is just an authentication system, right? Nicer way of doing it would be something like this. Hey, passport, here's user, now serialize it, right? And so we have to do it this way. So user creates strategy. It creates a strategy and passes it into the passport module. And then here, we serialize the user and we pass them into the passport serialized user method, and so on, because passport has nothing to do or doesn't know anything about users. Okay, questions so far? So this is just configuration so far. That's all we've done. We made a model, so we did make a user model, but that's all we've done, right? We're still left with routing, controlling, and views. Can't do any of that stuff. Can't do any authentication without those things, right? And my feeling is we should start off with routing and controllers, but we're going to create stubs for our controllers, so no actual logic, just like literally empty controllers for each one of our routes, right? But we're going to kind of do a side-by-side view of how to do that, like we've done before last week. So what I want to do now is I want to go back into our routes, and we have two routes. We have index route and a contact route. Now, if you think about this, logging in and logging out are kind of like top line stuff, top level things that you'd be able to do at like the same level as about and contact and home and all that stuff. So in our index is where they belong. Now, you could also make it so that there's a route just for user management, but we're not doing user management routing. We're not updating users. We're not doing full CRUD today, all right? And we're not listing users. We're not doing a user list. If I was doing a user list, I would have another set of routes and another set of controllers just for users, right? User management. We're not doing user management. That's another topic altogether, right? We're just authenticating. So we need to create users, and we're going to use the users we create to log in, but we're not going to manage users, okay? So we need index.js to do it for us. So that means at the bottom of this page, I'm going to start typing some stuff we need. So I need to get the login page, which is, I'm going to do a GET request that displays the login page, okay? I want to do also a post request that processes the login page, right? So I'm on the login page, I type in my username and password, and then I press submit. That's a post request, right? And then I want to use a GET request to display the user registration page. That's what I want, right? And then I want to use again, I'm just pseudocoding it here. I want to use a post request to process, or which processes the user registration page. Okay, that's what I'm kind of doing. I'm setting it up so that way you guys know what I'm planning to do. Now here's something else. I'm not going to ever have a logout page. Like, okay, I press logout, then I go to the logout page and it says, are you sure? Like, that's kind of weird, right? It's just going to log me off, right? So I don't want to do a post. I need just to do a GET. And what this is going to do is it's going to perform, user logout. That's what I want. So a GET request that performs logout, similar to delete. Remember we did the delete option earlier? The delete option, I mean, imagine having a delete page. We click delete and it goes to a delete page that says, okay, you're choosing to delete this thing. Here's the things you're choosing to delete. Are you sure? Yes, press delete, right? It's kind of not what we want. That's why we used that little pop-up last week that comes up and says, are you sure? That's okay, but making a whole delete page, typically we don't do. We just perform the deletion, right? So we don't need to do a post request. If I had a delete page, I could display it with GET, and I could actually perform the delete by pressing post or the delete button, which could do a post request. We're not doing that. Same with logout. Logout just logs out. All right, so this is what we want to do, right? And let's bring up our two sides here. What I want to do here is I want to create on this one, I want to create a new controller. Here's a new controller, right? And well, do I, or can I just add it to my index controller? Because I got my index route. I mean, I just want to add to my index controller here. That's what I want to do, right? So in my index controller, I have all these. And what I want to do is I want to kind of go down here and add new module exports. Now remember what we did here. we added a module exports and the name of the function that we're going to access, right? So if you weren't here last week or if you missed it, we split it off into our routes. We took the logic out of our route and put it into a separate controller, right? And what we did is we used module.exports and then just whatever the name of the controller, the function is, that we can access out here. So if you missed that, please refer back to last week's video, right? So that how this works would be something that looks like this: module.exports. Here has what it dot, and again, think about this: displays the login page. I'm going to call it display login page. Display login page. And we'll just kind of pull this over so you can see it better. My display login page is going to have this format: requests, response, next, and then it's going to use the new syntax, which is going to look something like this. So it looks like this, guys. Module exports, the name of the module, the name of the function, and then request, response, and next, and something that's going on in there. But for now, we're not going to do this. We're just going to call this a to-do, right? Something we need to fix. And what I want to do is I want to copy paste this a bunch of times because it's going to be exactly the same. So we're going to say module exports, instead of display login page, we want to process the login page, right? Okay. And okay, we're going to display the registration page. And I'm going to call this page maybe register. So display register page. I may have done it differently earlier. And then process register page, right? So we're displaying the register page and we're processing the register page, right? So these are the 4 stubs so far. All we're doing is making places that we're going to access. We haven't done anything yet. And then here in the last one is we're going to perform logout. There is no page. So we're just going to call this perform logout. Now, this is interesting because it kind of matches the names of our functions in our module will match almost exactly what the pseudocode is going to be, right? Look, it makes sense. Display the login page. Display login page, right? Process login page, process login page, and so on. And this should be descriptive like that. When you're passing this off to somebody else, I mean, it really should be something that describes what's happening so that another user should be able to pick up your code and go, okay, I get it. I know what's happening here, right? Cool, so we did this. Now let's make our routes. So the routes would look something like this. Router.get. And we're going to say that the login page is going to be called login, and we're going to say that index router, index controller. I'm just going to kind of move this over here so we have space. Index controller dot display login page. And you can see now that I can pull it up, right? Display login page. I mean, this is how easy it is now. We've already kind of, now we're going to complete our router right now. Router dot post, right? And slash login. Now, the question for you guys, last week we just did this and you guys followed along, but why does the post and get request use the exact same URL? How come? Why is this the same? How does this work? Kind of, yes. Anyone else have anything? Ryan, what do you think? Why do we have the same? You don't have a computer, so I can bug you. Why do we have the same URL here? Why is it slash login here and slash login here? Well, not kind of. Again, it's not reusing the same page. Anyone else? How about in the middle? These guys here in the middle. Anyone? I can pick on you if you want. Right? Well, okay, I'll tell you then. So remember that when we do a GET request and we go to this login page, what we're going to do with this logic, by the way, is we're going to just display the page, right? But we're already on the page now. So imagine I have my login page and it's displaying username, password, submit button, okay? And then I click submit. So there's 2 things I can do with my form. I could do a GET request method for my form, if you remember HTML, or I can do a post method for my form. Get method for my form means that I would change this to get, right? But then all my form data is going to be on the URL. It's going to say username is Tom, password is 123456. Who wants that? We don't need that. So we use a post request. A post request actually hides the data and doesn't go to the form. It goes directly to the thing that's going to manage the post request, which is our server. So post request goes to the server, makes a round trip, goes to the server, gets processed by the server, and then the server can direct the user anywhere they want. So it's the same address because this address here tells the server where the post request is coming from. The post request is coming from the login page. If that's true, then do this. If the post request is coming from some other page, then do something else, right? That's why it's the same link. Same thing goes here. So now I'm going to do a router.get. And again, for the register page, I'm going to call it register. It's going to be index controller. Let's see if you guys can fill this out by yourself before I type it. And it's going to be display the register page. That's what that is, right? And now we can go down into this part. We can say router.get and slash register and index controller. Thank you for that. I'll be okay. Index controller dot process register from a register page. Process register page. There we go. By the way, another problem with using the same type of request, there's two GET requests that have the same login. Which one do I process? Which thing do I do? So we use GET and POST also to differentiate what we're doing, right? With the same exact URL, right? Because if I use two GET requests, the signature is the same. Which one do I do? Do I do this one? Do I do this one? Do I do both? So maybe I immediately, display and process it at the same time because it'll do two round, kind of return trips. Why? Because remember what we're doing is we're using something called event-based, server management, right? Everything that we do for request response, it's event-based. It's almost like my server is watching the URL for any changes, right? As soon as the URL is updated or changes, my server responds with a response. Okay. Last one. Router.get and again /logout. By the way, you can call register sign in or sign up and logout sign out, login sign in. There's different ways of doing it. You can do all that. Sign in, sign out, sign up, right? Or log in, register, and log out. It depends what you like. I like this way. Some people like sign in, sign up, sign out, right? And I want to perform logout. That's what I'm doing. Okay, so those are the routes. We good? So routing is done. Controlling is not done. All right, so let's update GitHub for this. So we'll say updated index router with authentication roots. And I'm going to put this up on GitHub. I'm pushing this to GitHub so you can see the steps. If you ever want to go back into the commits, you can go from commit to commit and see what I've done every step if you really care. It's also good for your development, right? Because I can always step back. Okay. We still need to finish this part, right? And in order for us to finish this part now, we need to make some views because I can't point to something with my controllers when there's no views to point to. I have no views. I need two views. I need a login view and a register view. I need those two views, okay? But one thing to do before we go any farther is, hey, did we break something in my code? Because if we broke something in my code here, I mean, like that would be very, very bad. So how do I know this? And you can see that right now, I don't know, for whatever reason, I can't see my page at all. And this is a bad, bad thing. So I'm going to close this up, right? And let's just run nodemon again. I want to make sure that I'm able to see my connection to Mongo, that there's no errors in my server. If I have errors in my server after what I've just done, I need to fix them, because if I move on, then I got to go back and I'm going to be like, wait a minute, what did I do? Was it the time when I added my roots? Wait, was it the time that I finished my logic? Wait, was it the time that I did my views? Wait, when did I update? When did I mess up? And I want to check our server regularly. All right, let's kill these. I don't need these right now. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is create a new view or a new set of views for log in and log out. I want to put them inside my regular area here. However, this is a place where you have to think about what I'm doing. It's not user views, it's authentication views that I'm creating. If I was going to make user management, I'd make another set of folders called user, right? But here, it's not contacts and it's not users, it's auth. Again, I'm going to make a new folder here. I'm going to call it auth. You can call it authentication-based stuff, whatever you want. I like auth. It's kind of a simple way of naming. I'm going to kind of go in here and make a new file. And the first one I make is the login EJS file, right? Remember that in my login, what I want to do for my login is I want to be able to go into my view and I want to include different pieces. One piece I want is, again, including goes like this. I want to include .. / partials / header.ejs. Okay, and I also want to include .. / partials / footer.ejs. I want to include those two things because I want to include my nav bar, and I also want to include the last part of my stuff. It came at a good time. So in my nav bar, right, I want to have my main. So I want to say main, and just to help me with my code hinting, I'm going to change it from EJS to HTML so I can get some Emmet usage. So again, I want a main section with a class of container. Inside my main, I want to have a div with a class of row. Inside of that, I want to have a div with a class of column dash medium dash offset 4 and column dash medium dash 4. This just sets up Bootstrap in a good way for me, right? So that it kind of configures what I want. I also want in there, I want an H1 tag. Inside the H1 tag, use curly brace for that. I'm going to say, please log in. You can see the preview right here, right? Please log in. And then next to that, next to is plus. Greater than means inside of, right? So next to the H1 tag, I want a form, and I want the form to have a method that is post, the post method. I can keep going. All one line, right? And inside the form, I want to have a field set. I want to have 3 field sets, right? 3 field sets, and all of them are going to have a class of form group. Okay, I want them to have a class of form group. Inside the field set, I want them to have a label, right? There's a label. And next to the label, I want to have an input. And inside the input, I want the input to have a class of form-control. Massive, eh? But it saves time. That's why I'm doing it this way. It saves time because I don't have to do anything. This is good. I think this is probably good. And if I click on this little blue link, it just does everything for me, right? So I don't have to type all that work. And also, guys, the reason why I like using this kind of thing is because it helps me with errors in typing. Typing errors are a very bad thing. They slow you down a lot. And this one will reduce some of that. Won't take it away. Won't take it away, but it will reduce only because there's just less to mess up, right? If you had, I almost messed up. If you have less to type, it's good. It's better, right? Are you with me? Pretty straightforward. I just created a structure for my form. I created a structure where my login is going to be. I need an H1 tag. H1 tag says, please log in. I'm also going to have a form with a post method. I don't need an action, so I can get rid of this, right? So I don't need an action for my form. And then my field set has form group. This is cool. My for label is going to be for username. So the first one is going to be my username label. So username. This one here is going to be for password, right? Username, password. And I want some kind of submit button, right? So this is kind of weird. I probably shouldn't have done this. I'm going to kind of take these away for now. I want a field set for buttons. That's what I want. So this is what it kind of looks like now. My for is for username. And usually you have labels and inputs, and they're related. So this one is for password. My username is text, but my password is password type. Password means that you're going to get those ... dots when you start entering your stuff on your form. So you won't see the password. It won't be clear text, right? I want to make this both things required. I want to make this required, and I want to make this required. You can't just enter a username, and you can't just enter a password. You need both. And I also want to have some placeholder text. Let's make some room. So I'm going to kind of put this on the next line here. And so I want a couple things. I want name is equal to username. Remember that name is actually the variable name. And the placeholder is actually going to be like some instructions. Enter username. So again, for this one, the name will be password. And the placeholder is going to be enter password, which is going to appear in the field. Are you with me? So username, password. That's all I'm doing. I'm creating two fields, one for username, one for password. Both are required. I also want to make the username always autofocus. So I can say required autofocus. So that means when the form starts, it's always going to go to the username by default. Okay. When the form resets, it's going to go to the username. All right. So it doesn't start over. It doesn't start where it left off. It's going to reset. Sometimes also, what about if the user and password, what about if the user is a new user? I don't want to necessarily create a sign up link on my URL, my navigation. I want to give them a chance to sign up when they log in. That's one way of doing it. So in the same field set as the password, I can put in a little thing that says or, right? And then I can say, I want an anchor tag that's in there that I want to go to my register page. And I can say that I want to, it's going to be a link. It's not going to be a button. I want to register here. So if you can't enter a username and password, then just register. By the way, you could also include other registration locations. Like for example, at the bottom of you could create a footer, which we haven't done yet on your website, that says register or other things, right? So there you go. So there's username and password. We have a little register link, and we need a couple of buttons. So one of the buttons is going to be an input type. And my input type is not text, but actually the submit button. This is a different way of doing it with a class of button-success. And the success button is a green button. The value of the button is going to be login. Okay? That's button number one. And what I want is, I want an anchor tag, right, to take me back to the main page, but I'm going to surround or encapsulate this other button I'm going to make right here. Another input with a type of button and a value of cancel. What you're going to do is when I click this button, it's going to take me back to the root, my home page. And what I'm going to do here is the button is also going to have a class, and it's going to be button dash warning. So a yellow button that's going to take me back. One thing I also want for this field class is I want to use another class that's called text dash right, which is going to take my buttons and put them to the right side of the form. Right, so some configuration. Are you with me? So this is just the login page, but we're not done. Remember that I told you I want to use Connect Flash. I need a place where the messages are going to come on the page. I need to kind of create a container for them, right? And the place to do that would be at the top of the page. So underneath my container, above my row, between my container and my row, I want to include another variable area. What I mean by that is it's going to change depending on if there's a message or not. So if message, we don't have messages, but if my messages.length is greater than 0, that means if I have a message, do I have a message now? No. But if I do, then I want to do some kind of conditional statement. Now notice I can't just leave it open like this. I need to encapsulate this one with a % greater than sign, and I need to encapsulate this one with a less than % and % greater. So this creates my code block. Next week, guys, you'll be asked to do some EJS like this where it allows you to create a conditional statement or something like that. All right, and inside there, I want to say, well, if my message length is greater than 0, that means I have a message, some kind of message. I want my div, a div with a class of alert, and then alert dash danger to appear. And I want to insert inside that div any messages that I have. So what the heck does this do, right? So imagine that there's a div underneath the container. That means that the div is going to take up the entire size of my screen. There is no, I'm only using 5 columns. I'm using all the columns, as many columns as I can, right? So there's going to be a red box that comes up that says, you didn't log in properly, you idiot, you know, or something like that. But much nicer than that. It's going to say, sorry, you failed to log in. Here's a question for you. Do you want to tell people that your username is incorrect? You want to tell them that? Security-wise, it's not a good idea, right? That means that, guess what? I've just told you that your username is valid, right? Or your username is not valid. One of the two things, right? If I say username is valid and I press my password and it's wrong password, say wrong password. If I said that at the top, that means my username's okay, my password's wrong. That means I can bombard the, the login system with, login attempts until I get the right password. I can hack, right? So you don't want to ever give the user any information, especially a foreign user, about how to get into your account. This is kind of like, it's not really security, but it's like security 101, like not doing that kind of stuff typically. And we've kind of put those bad things inside the code already. We're going to fix them. But I wanted to talk about it. This is not a security course, right? And it's not a web course, but I need to talk about some basics. These are basics. So this is where the alert is going to go at the top of the page. You could also put it at the bottom of the page. Some people put it inside each of the fields. I don't think that's good because it messes up with your layout, right? So it kind of makes your layout bump around. Not too fond of that, but everyone, if that's your own design choice, that's for you. It's not going to take away the functionality. All right, we're good. We finished off our login page. I know I did it differently the first in kind of in the first section, but I want to create my register page right away. So I'm going to go to my auth. I make a new page. We'll call this the register page. So register.ejs. I'm going to take my login page and copy paste. So I'm going to take my login page, copy the whole thing, and go to my register page and paste. Here what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove some stuff. So my register page is not the login page, but however, there are some similarities. And the similarities start with the inclusions, right? So I need to include partials header. I saved that already. I'm still going to do a class of container, right? And you know what? I still want my messages to be at the top. I want messages to be up here because what if, you know, as an example, and I didn't do this in the first class. I forgot to put this part in, but in the first class, what if I have a message up there that says, "Hey, you register the same user. You're trying to register the same user, man. You can't do that. I want to be able to show that up here too." Or, "Hey, you know what? You need some more information." Or there's a server error or something. I want all my information to be up here. So this is valid, right? I'm going to go down to this part where it says, "Please log in." Again, I've just copied everything from the login page into the register page right now. Okay. But instead of "please log in," it's going to say user, or, you know, "please register." Let's say I kind of made this user registration. I'm just going to say "please register." So register for your page, right? It's going to be a post request. That's the same thing. The first part is going to be username. That's the same thing. It's going to say, you know, the placeholder is going to be enter username. I'm not going to autofocus this one, right? Because we don't need to autofocus it. It's still going to be name, username. So I'm saving all that time that I've spent in the first class. Should have done this way. I told you I always save time second class. This part's cool. So the password is the same. So I put the password in there. It's still required. It's still enter password. It's still form control. All these things are all the same. There's no difference there. I don't need this part though, because I don't want to register again when I'm registering. So that's gone, right? The buttons are good. Success, instead of login, the value will be register, and the cancel button will be the same. However, I need a couple of additional form groups. One of them is going to be my email. So I'm going to take this part right here, and I'm going to kind of copy it in here. And we'll fix this formatting later. But instead of password, this will be email. For email, this will be email, because I want to get the user's email address as well for later use, right? My type will be email, actually, and my name is email. And instead of enter password, we're going to enter email. So that's all changed. We have an email. And we have a couple more, maybe one more. The last one will be the display name, right? So again, for display name separate, right? The type is text. The name is display name, and my placeholder is enter display name. Okay. I am missing something from all of these that I just realized I'm missing, as well as the login page. I forgot to include an ID. It's useful for two things. One is, I'm just going back to the login page for a second. It's useful because you can tag it for additional coding, CSS, as well as for the for label. I need it for that as well. So this will be password. Sorry, it's just updating. And that's all I need there. Again, I'm just putting an ID in there. That's all I'm doing. And same thing on here. So this on the username will have an ID. Let's put it on the required. This will be username. And the same thing goes here. I thought about this and I was like, wait a minute. And this will be password. And this one will be email. Additional tag so I can connect to this thing. And this will be display name. Again, I'm just configuring my HTML so that I have more hooks to connect to this thing. ID shouldn't be login, it should be username. Sorry, forgot about that. Cool. We're good. And my friends, we're done my register page. So register, and we've got both register pages and login pages, right? There's really very little difference between the two, except that the register page has an email and display name, some minor modifications to the please register instead of please log in, as well as the button is going to say register instead of log in. Hey, could I have done one page, login/register, where I used EJS to detect which page I'm on and add or remove items? And the answer is yes, I could have, but I don't want to confuse you, so I'm not doing it. Okay, but I could. You just use EJS to create the page for you, add HTML what you need, and change the buttons or whatever you want, right? Lots of control here. All right, now that we have the two pages, we can test them. We have two pages. We have our login and register page. Let's add that into GitHub. So we're going to say something like added login and register pages, right? So that's what we did. Keeping track of our development cycle. One thing we don't have, though, is any kind of logic for logging in or registering, right? So let's do that next. So we have our auth, right, as an example, and we want to go into our controllers section. Here's our controller section. And if you look at our index, we have these empty controllers, right? And what we want to do here is I want to go into my display login page and display it. So how would this look? So we already have a stub, a place where we can actually, kind of put in our logic. And now we just simply have to include it to make sure that I have everything correct. Before we continue, gives you a chance to catch up too if you're behind. All right, so let's do it. First things first, I want to display the login page. So how does this look? The login page to be displayed is pretty simple. We do a request, response, and next, and we want to check if, let's check first, check if user is already logged in, right? That's possible. What if the user's already logged in? You're going to display the login page again? You're going to go to do all that stuff and re-render everything? Nah. Let's just avoid it. Let's just send it back send them back. Say thanks. You're already here, right? You're already logged in. So if the user request.user, right? If he's not in, if there is no user, remember, because the request, if it doesn't have a user object, well, then do this, then log him in. Otherwise, if he does have a user object, what the heck is he doing here? He's trying to log in when he's already logged in. So we don't let that happen. So we're going to say else, right? If that's true, then we want to res.redirect to the home page or wherever he was before. Okay, so if the user's not logged in, then do something. Otherwise, return him back to the home page. Put him back somewhere, right? So what if he isn't logged in? We want to log him in, right? So we're going to say a couple things. We're going to say that, well, first let's display the page. So we're going to res.render. We're going to render the login page. And we're going to go to auth/login to display the login page. And then we're going to send some additional information. One of them is the title is going to be login. So that's going to change the title of the page, the tab. It's also, we're going to send messages. The messages is going to be request.flash. And we need to set up a login message, right? So this is interesting. Request.flash, and I got to hover over here so you can see this. When you go to request.flash, because we never used it yet, we have three overloads, right? The first one is some kind of key string, right, that we're going to kind of suggest. Here's our key. And then with a message. That's the thing that we have to do. Blah, and then a message. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, the other options are just a message. Right? We can do that too. And the third one is an event string, and a message string. So, you know, something that happened, something to watch for, and then a message. Here, we're just going to put in the actual message string itself. So it's going to be login message. This is kind of like the key for our message. The other thing that we want to put is a display name. I want to start displaying my name to the user. So I'm going to say rec user and rec.user. Explain to me what this is. Display name for this. So what the heck is this? Why do I need this? So it says, hey, I want to send a display name property, but let's check if the request user exists. If he exists, return the display name of the user. Otherwise, don't display anything. Don't return anything. Make my display name empty. But typically, if we're going to get here in the login page, and if he's already logged in, then we're not going to need to do this, yeah? However, we're going to test for it later on in my nav bar. And if I test for something, I need to have that something to test for. If I don't, so let's say, for example, I'm testing for display name. Hey, does the user exist? Display the name of the user, right? But if I ask to display something in my nav bar and it doesn't exist, it's going to error out. It's actually going to crash my code. So I have to have this every single time. In fact, I have to have this everywhere from now on, because I'm going to have a display name property in every single time I'm online, right? So that means when I modify my nav bar, I need to have this. And that means up here where I have about, products, services, contact, and all this stuff, again, I didn't get to this earlier, I need to have that display name in there too, even though I'm never going to use it, potentially, right? Why? Because if I go to my title, I want to see my display name maybe, right? Hey, welcome user, you know? So the way to do this, if I'm going to include a display name, is literally copy this display name part right here. So I'm going to take this part right here, copy it, and where I already have home, about, product, services, and contact, paste it in there. So paste, 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 and paste. And we're going to have other places to paste this too. So display name is always going to go in, whether it's blank or not. Okay? Cool. So that's what this part does. So it kind of tries to log him in. If he can't, if he's already logged in, he's not going to do the login. Save it. Let's check to see if my stuff is still working. It still is. I'm still good. Let's see if how my app looks. If I go here to my home now, I'm good, right? And if I click on /login, then I should see my login page. If I go here to click the register page, I should see the, oh man, because I haven't programmed the register page yet. That's why it does that. So let's program the register page. I'm going to skip over the processing the login page, and I'm just going to print out the register page. Again, I'm doing this differently than this morning, but I'm doing it so I can see all my pages first, even if they don't have any functionality. So when I display my register page, it's very similar to displaying my login page. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to check to see if my user exists. So if not, request.user, then I can do it. Otherwise, I'm trying to register when I'm already signed in. That doesn't make any sense, right? So don't let the user register. He's going to log out. So again, res.render, I'm going to say that he's going to render the auth/register page, and I'm going to pass in a very similar stuff that I did over here. In fact, I can almost copy paste everything and copy all this and go in here, paste it in. Instead of login, it's going to be register. And instead of the flash being a login message, it's going to be the register message. And the display name is the exact same. If, however, I am already logged in, then I'm going to do the same thing that I did here, which is redirect to the root page. And there's my register page. Done. I've done both. One thing we ran into earlier was when you're logged in, if we test login and logout or register, I want to be able to log out. And the logout is stupid easy to do. So let's perform the logout first, right? So notice when I perform a logout, I don't have a logout page. and I don't have a logout process. I just need to do logout. And logging out is actually the easiest thing you can do here. I just have to do this, request.logout. That's it, I'm logged out. Request.logout, right? And I want to res.redirect, again, I want to do this res.redirect stuff back to the root page, right? If I log out, take me back. That's it. My logout is done. My logout logic is finished. I can log out now. I need this because later on, when I want to log out, I'm going to test logging in and registering, and I want to be able to log out by just pressing /logout. And so I don't have to worry about this. Otherwise, I'm always going to be logged in, and I won't be able to test more than one user. So something I ran into this morning. Are we good? Let's check it out and see if that works. So I'm going to go to login, and I can see the login page. If I click register, I see the register page, which looks very similar to the login page. I see some autocomplete stuff from my previous session. Who cares? Maybe not a good idea for the register page or the logout page in general. You can turn autocomplete off. Do we know how to do that? So if you look at HTML autocomplete, then remember that in HTML you have this autocomplete on. You can also turn autocomplete off, right? And you can do that for either the inputs or for the entire form, right? So an example of that would be if I went back to the form data, and I recommend it. I know it's not always, doesn't always work properly, I'll be honest with you. But if you go to the login page, there's a couple things I'd recommend. One is your form itself should be autocomplete is off. Turn that autocomplete off. I think it says here, autocomplete off. And I want to do that for all of the items. I want autocomplete off for my input. So I want to say autocomplete off, and as well as my password, autocomplete off. Don't let that stuff come on. They should type it on in again, right? I know it's less convenient for the user. They want to be able to go in there and remember username and password. However, it's not secure at all. I mean, someone else can go to the user. Like if you guys use that, I don't know if you use that for banking information. Hey, remember who I am? Don't do that, because someone can remember who you are. All right, take all your money too, right? So turn that off. And again, this is like, I always think about this as like security 101. Always have a security in mind, and think about someone is going to one day you access your computer, one day. And if they access your computer, do you want them to have the ability for them to use your username and password automatically? And the answer is no, you don't. But make sure you specifically say autocomplete is off, at least on the front end. Now, like I said, this may not work. We'll see. If I go back to this page, my register page, and if I refresh, it still shows it. Some of it's because of caching, but some of it's because I've set my page to remember, right? My page, because Chrome remembers, right? So it's too late for me. Too late for me, right? But not too late for you. So don't do this. Okay, so now username. Well, we want to try and log in. If I press the login button, it's going to cycle because there's no login process right now. Okay. Let's make the login work. So again, I'm going to go back. I'm just going to kill this one and kill this one and go back into my index page. And I'm going to go to process the login page. Okay. So this isn't so bad. The process the login page, it doesn't work like this though. See this? No good. In fact, the login page has its own process. It kind of looks like this. Passport. Uh-oh. Wait a minute. We're trying to access passport here stuff. Do we even have passport in? No. We have to actually make the passport work. So let passport equal to acquire passport. If we don't do that, we have no way of logging in and doing anything. That has to be on the top of the page. Other thing I recommend, we probably should include Mongoose in here. May not use it, but we might want to include Mongoose inside this page because we may need it later on. So again, Mongoose. They're access in the database. We may need it. Probably won't. Okay, so again, this is okay. And coming down to here, passport dot authenticate. I can do that now. And when I go authenticate, right, when it comes to, it's going to be like this. Authenticate with what? I want to authenticate with my local strategy. Next, what's the next thing I want to do? Well, I want to have a series of parameterized options that I can use. So what happens when I authenticate successfully? So notice that there's no request, response, and next for this one, okay? When I authenticate successfully, I need a success redirect. A success redirect. My success redirect is going to do this. It's going to say, okay, good. Where do I want to go? Well, let's suppose we want to safeguard the contact list page. Let's go there. So if we can see the contact list page, we've logged in. My success redirect. And I want to put it, notice it gives me an error. This is good. This is why I love code hinting. Because actually that's wrong. It should look like this. And what about if I fail? So fail redirect. Look at the different errors we have. Fail redirect. If my fail redirect happens, I want to do a couple things. I want to do my back to login. I want my login page. Does that make sense? So I've got success redirect, failure redirect. Okay. There's also some other options. Authenticate has a bunch of overloads, right? So this is one way of doing it. Let me just go in here and show you other ones. We're not going to use this one. But if I go to passport authenticate and then go local, look, I have two different options. One is the strategy and then the callback. Notice that this is not a callback. These are arguments, right? So the other one is strategy options callback. Yeah? Strategy options callback. So I want to be able to respond to my redirects a little bit differently. We're going to talk about this. This is how it's going to fix the flash problem. All right. But so I have two options. So I can actually add an additional callback function after I do this part. Right. So I can say when I'm done, then do something else. I can do that over here. Gives us more options. But for now, let's put in my failure flash. So my failure flash should be something like, incorrect login. We don't want to give people to know what it is. We just want to know, that it is what it is. Now, failure flash is actually this incorrect login should match the flash message that comes up here. So you see this thing called login message? That's the flash, right? So we should make this login message. Login message. And then the failure message, right, goes here, which says, something like login or authentication problem, authentication error, right? So we don't want people to know what, is it a username? Is it a password? Is it both? I don't know. You're not going to know either. It's just not working, right? Cool. So login message. See the same? Authentication error is the error. So hopefully this is going to work for us. This is going to have something that I want to work. Let's try this out. So do we have a user right now? No, we have no user. So no matter what we do here, if we go back to this, and again, let's see if we're still running. We're still good. Yay, we're not crashed. If we go back to run, so back here, and if I press in login, we should get we got redirected, but oh man, what happened to my failure flash? Gone. I don't know what happened. And this is a problem that we had earlier today. But that's how it should work. It should work that it redirects me back to the login page, and I see a little message that comes up on the top. It has to do with the messages that I set up. So you see that it says messages, request flash, or whatever it is. That's what has to happen. My request flash has a message. By the way, request flash, if I put a message in there, so here's my test message, right? I want to show you this. And if I go back and refresh the page, it should show up, yeah? That's my test message. And guess what? It ain't working. It's not working, right? Why? Because my message.length is what's being shown. And there is a message here, right? Here, let's even do we'll take one step further than this, okay? Let's do messages, right? And put in a message, hello, right? And then we'll comment this one out, okay? If we did it properly in the first place, and if I refresh, there should be a message that says, hello. This is what the message will look like, guys. You see? This works, but this doesn't, which means my request flash, we need to look at this later on. No time right now. We will. But that's what it should look like. It should come up there and says, hey, incorrect login. I'm going to fix this. But for now, we're putting in the messages that are in there properly. We'll look up that if we have time later. Cool. So our login should work now. Let's try it out. So if we log in properly, well, wait a minute. We can't log in because we have no users. We ran into this earlier. Could I log in or register a user through my interface? The answer is yes, I could. Here's the problem. I need to hash my password because I need to serialize and deserialize. Hell, could I create a 256 character password like by myself that makes sense? The answer is hell no. I cannot do that, right? I need to like register a user before I actually test for the user. That's kind of a weird thing too, right? So I need my registration page is the answer. So let's do this. Let's register. So my registration page kind of looks similar to my login page, but the first thing I want to do is do something that looks like this. I want to say that when I process my registration page, I want to let a new user equal to a new, I need a user model. Wait a minute. Do I have a user model on this page? No. That means up here somewhere, below the passport, I want to define the user model, right? I'll be able to do that. So I got to do something like let user model equal to require models users. User. Right? So that's the first thing. I need to make a user model equal to this. And then I need to set up a user. We'll say that I'll just do the same thing as last time. We'll set the user as an alias to user model.user because we might use it more than once, right? So alias, that is. And this user itself is something that I want to go back down here with and say, hey, I want this user to be a new user, right? And the user that I want to set up on the bottom here is one that I'm going to be using throughout. So I'm going to say that it's a new user. I want to configure this user, and the configuration is going to look like this. Username, that's the property, is equal to request.body. Remember this? From last week, username, which just means that from the form, it's going to take the username variable that enters the name property, the name attribute of the form, and it's going to be injecting that into the username of the user. Okay? And then password. So my password would normally be cool. I want to have my password, but guess what? I don't want a clear text password. And I've omitted this. Normally it would look like this. It'd be request.body.password, right? That's what it would normally be. But guess what? We don't do it this way anymore. We don't use clear text passwords at all. We don't pass them along. We configure them a little differently. Email. Request.body.email. That has to happen. And also display name, which is my requests dot body dot display name. Okay, that's the user. So we have a new user object, and that's what we're doing. So first of all, we define a new user object, or create one, whatever you want to call it. Once we've done this, we can use it here, because what we want to do is we want to log in. So what I want to do is I want to use the user model, right, to register a new user. And it takes there's 4 overloads for this, right? One of them is my user and a password, and that's it, right? Second overload is user, a password, and some kind of callback function with an error to detect if there's an error. And the third one is a user, a password with a promise, different kind of promise, and the error again. So I'm going to use this format right here: user, password, which is a string, and a callback, which handles any errors that when we log in. Okay? Let's do it. So user register. And what I want to do is I want to pass in the new user first. So I'm going to put some space in between here. I'm going to pass in the first thing, which is my new user. The second thing is my password, which is request.body.password. This is where I use that. Thirdly is the callback function, which is going to look like this. So we're going to use an error. We're going to hold the error variable. And we're going to use the new function definition. We're going to do a console log, right? Just to show me what if there's an error. So I'm going to say, it's going to say something like error inserting new user. So if I have a problem inserting new user, it's going to show me there. Okay, that's an error. And then we're going to say that if my error dot name, if the name of my error, because actually each error has a specific name, is equal to user exists error, that's also a possibility, right? I'm being more specific here. I'm saying if it's a user exists error, then I want to request.flash, right? I want to register the register message. Here's my register message. I want to specify that it is a registration error. User already exists, right? And you know what? Just to mirror this, I also want to do a console log, right, on the bottom that says the same thing. So I'm going to spit this out to the console as well as into that flash area of our page, if I can ever get it to work. Okay, so error, user already exists, error, inserting the user. We don't know what the error is. We're specifying what it is. Okay. Cool. Again, sometimes that is also a security problem. Yes, because now we're specifying, yeah, the user exists. We're testing. We're trying to register for a user, and if the user exists, now we know the user's name, right? We can take that username, and now we can go and hit it and try and get the password, right? So it's like I want to say it that the user already exists, because if a user tries to log in, they know that the user exists. But it's like at the same time, if I don't say it, then they won't know what the problem is. So it's kind of like chicken and the egg thing, right? Like imagine a user trying to register and like, damn it, I don't know why, but I can't register, right? Well, because you've already registered, right? But if I do this, and if I'm being insidious, I want to find a way of getting into the system, then I'm getting information that the user's already registered, which means I have the username. It means I can go and hack the password. So again, it is what it is. And you're kind of decide like how much is too much security. I want to return, this is interesting, res.render, and I want to go to the auth/register page, And inside there, I want to pass almost like I'm doing the whole thing again, right? Here's my auth register. And I want to pass in some of the same stuff I had before. I want to pass in the title and all this stuff, right? I want to pass in messages, display name, but the register message is actually going to be an error, right? It's gonna have my error in there because I've actually configured it up here. Here's my register message, and I configured it down here, right? So I kind of said like request flash. Here's my register message, right? So I'm kind of printing out my register. I'm setting up my register message here, kind of, and I'm using it down here. I don't know if that makes any sense, right? So this gives us a hint of how to make it work. All right, so this is if I have an error, right? And it comes down to this, but what if no error exists? So I've got up to here, I'm good, right? I'm up to here, I'm good. I've got this one that closes up this one right here, this error part, right? But what if no error exists, right? So again, if you see this is where it's really helpful. You can see that this part right here, this curly brace points to the error curly brace, right? I've got this curly brace where I ran into earlier today. This curly brace points to this curly brace over here. The return res render, right, has its own set of curly braces. So this points to this curly brace, and I've got this one that points to the other one. And what I could do is I can say something like, well, how about if no error exists? So if no error exists, then do whatever you're going to do, right? But actually, that's not how it works. And what I mean by this is it's actually like this. This part is actually part of this. This closes off this bracket, and this part right here, this curly brace, it goes down to here. This one is this one. So this part is right here. And what I want to do is inside the error itself, right? Because I have 1, 2, 3 curly braces. I have 1, 2, 3 curly braces opening, and I close off one. Here's one to close off this one. I'm just counting them so you can see them, right? And it's easy to see 1, 2, 3 curly braces, right? So 1, 2, 3 curly braces. And it's almost like I need to put something in when no error exists. But where, oh, where do I put that funky stuff? Because this one is part of this curly brace here is actually this. This is if an error occurs, right? I want to redirect is what I want to do, right? I want to redirect. This curly brace here is cool, but this one should be closing off another one. So, and I want to show you where this goes. So here's my registration. This one right here, it closes off this piece. That's the whole register piece, right? So that theoretically should be the thing that I'm closing off up here, right? So right at the bottom, inside of my actual function itself, which is this whole function, if everything goes well, and if I come to this point at the bottom of my function, right, I want to redirect the person. I want to say that, well, hey, guess what? If no error exists, and I've gotten to this point, right, then registration is successful, yeah? That means that I should redirect the user where he's supposed to be, which is return passports.authenticate. And I'm going to authenticate him with a local strategy. And I'm going to also immediately, this is something of, when it comes to this, if I put brackets like this, what does it do? It actually calls the authenticate function. It's a self-calling function if I do it this way, right? So I'm actually calling the function. I'm passing in a request response object, right? And a callback function that looks like this. And I think, have I put my foot in it yet? I might have. I might have put my foot in it already. But let's just see how it goes. How about that? We may have to put that up a little bit higher, right? And what I want to do, I want to do a res.redirect back to where he's supposed to go, which is I'm going to redirect him into the contact list, because that's where he's registering in the first place. I think, like I said, I put my foot in it. I mean that in the best possible way, truly. It's all these callbacks within a callback within a callback. It always messes me up, being honest, right? So this probably is not where we want to do it, because if I think about this again, that means that no matter what happens, when I process my registration page, no matter what happens, whether I'm successful or not, right? If I go through my user register part, this part right here, and by the way, I mean, the way I think about it is this. If I was to make this an object, I can see that this part closes off here. I can see that this part closes off right here. That's why this is cool to include. And it's part of the prettier package of Visual Studio Code. I found that this one closes off here. So this is kind of self-encapsulating right here, right? But this callback function is kind of what I want to put. I want to put this stuff inside of there, right? I want to put this stuff here. I want to put this inside of here, right? Because this is where it belongs, right? Notice that it kind of grays out a little bit. Notice that this return is good, but this return, not good, because this is unreachable. This code down here, can't reach it. If you could reach it, then I wouldn't have to do this part. Well, take a look. I said, if this is true, then do this. And then I do this return. So let's just check that code out here for a second. The other thing, I think is where the problem is. So yes, I see where the problem is. I see what I did wrong. So I'm going to fix this. So first I check to see if there's an error. That's what I forgot to do. If there's an error, then do the console log and blah, 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 and check that there's an error name and return blah, 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 blah. So that I have to kind of encapsulate this thing with an additional curly brace. That's why I was being confused. So it's inside here, inside this error piece. So let's move that back. So this is actually correct. But the reason why this is giving me a weird thing is because, well, once I've gotten to this point, well, who cares, right? So this part here should be all inside here. And now this thing will light up. So I've just encapsulated it inside of a function. I'm just going to just curly brace this so that we can see it. I'm going to format the document, and so you can see the whole thing in its glory, crazy as it is. So again, register, I have to create this. I'm going to check to see if there is, in fact, an error, even though I've passed in, what the heck? Oh, yeah, that's the one thing that VS Code does for you. It takes away round brackets if you don't need them. Why wouldn't I need it here? Because if it's the only property, fat arrow function tells us you don't. However, check if there's an error. And if there's an error, then I want to spit out the console log to the server. It shows it. Then I make another if statement that shows, hey, this is what's happening. Use the error. Otherwise, return and register the user. Right? That's what this does. So we return them back to the user and go back to the registration page and show a register message. However, if it's no error, there could be like an else here if you really want to, but it doesn't really matter. If you get to this point, then the if statement failed, right? There's no error, so therefore it will do this stuff. But if you really want to be explicit to make sure it's clear, you could put an else statement in here. This is even more clear, and grab this stuff and put it inside the else statement, right? By the way, I'll show you what happens if I reformat it, format document. It takes away this again, right? I'm just showing you so you know I didn't take it away. I didn't forget about it. I did it, and then it fixed it up. So this is kind of it in its explicit glory, right? So if the error, good. Else, if there's no error, then do this. Okay, make sense? Maybe that's a little bit more clear for you guys. It's more clear for me anyway. All right, cool. That's the registration page. Let's see if it works. All right, and I'll put this up online if it does, so you can compare your code with my code. All right, register. Okay, so please register. Let's register an admin user, which is what I want. I want an admin user, and I want to give them a password. I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But it won't matter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, there's its password, and I want to log. This is my login page. So I check my login page. It doesn't work. I went to my register page. I went to my admin user, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. My email is admin, let's say, at example.com. My display name is admin, and I click on register. Yes. Logs me in, right? Okay, cool. I'm logged in. So if I go to my login page, it should kick me out and bring me back here. Watch. Or it should bring me back to the root page. Okay? And if I log out, I go to that page and my contact list, and I click log out. Brings me back to here. And if I want to see the contact page, no problem. I want to protect this thing. I want to protect my contact page. I need to do that. That's why I'm doing this in the first place. I don't want people seeing my contacts, right? I want to protect my contact page. I only want me to see it, not you, right? I have all these does I want to protect, right? And Chuck Jones and Tony Stark. Come on, right? So this works. It seems to work, right? But I don't have a problem. I have a problem authenticating. So let's log out again. And I want to register my admin user again. So test number 1. I want to register my guy. I want to go here and go admin. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I want to go admin at example.com. I want to register him again. And my display name is admin. And I want to click register. Yes, it worked. Register error. User already exists. Hey, wait a minute. How come I made my registration page work here? But when I tried to do the same thing with login, it didn't work. This is good. That's what I want, right? Well, it's good and bad. Bad because guess what? Admin already works. Let's just hack admin until I get in, right? I also don't have a maximum number of attempts. There's nothing that I've specified inside my authentication protocol that allows people to that can drop people off. If you attempt more than 3 times, it locks you out. So you can't try and register that user again or blocks the site or something. I don't have anything like that yet. So this is kind of giving us a hint of how this works. So the way the register message works is if I have a problem, right, then I configure the register flash message, right? So I say, well, look, so my register flash, my request flash says register a variable, set up a message for it. Cool. And when I set this variable up, now go to the page and use that message, retrieve that message from the variable. So if that's true, going back up to this is kind of right. My messages for my display register page is good. This is good, right? My message from my display login page is wrong. My test message will be lost, right? What I want to do is rather when I fail to authenticate, I want to do a callback, to say that if error, right? I want to do a callback here. Say if I have an error, right? When I redirect, I know what my failure redirect is. It's this login, right? But on error, I want to do the same kind of thing, right? I want to kind of log in. I want to go back to this kind of thing down here. So I want to do this kind of thing. I want to error, you know, whatever. And I almost like want to take all this piece here, right? And go with this. I'm going to copy this piece and see if it works. I might be wrong. I'm going to have to look this up too, because I'm just kind of guessing, to be honest with you, on how this works. If error, yeah. So here's error. Instead of console log error inserting user, error authenticating user, put that in the console log, right? I don't care about the type of error that I want right now. I don't care about this, but I do care about this request flash. So let's kind of do in there. I kind of put in there like request flash, right? And I also want to check to see if there is an error, right? Like what if there's not an error? Then that would be a problem too. So I kind of want to frame this whole thing with if there's an error, kind of already done. If there's an error, then do this. And make sure I have enough curly braces. This one goes to there. But I'm missing another curly brace for this error. That goes to, I'm gonna have to check this again. Because I need another curly brace down here, I think. Right? And I need one more, because this one does, this one takes care of this one. Maybe I do. But this can't make any sense. Look, this one closes off this one, right? What about this piece? Right? I added a whole other slew of things in here, right? What it should do is close here, right? This part closes here, and then it closes like this. That's what it closes like, right? Because this closes this one, right? So what I need, if I'm going to include all this part, let's just disclude this one for a second. So if I take this whole part out, so that's what happens with things. If I take this part out, what it looks like is this. That's correct, right? Because it's actually doing, this whole thing is that, right? What I need to do is actually put a thing inside there. So this has to end with that stuff there. So if I do something like this, right, then this callback function does from here to a purple curly brace. No, you have to track them. So this one closes this one. This is the flash message. This is the login message. Let's fix this. There we go. Login message, because the login message looks like login message, right? Looks like login message, right? My login message is going to be error authenticating, or I could say authentication error, probably more common. Authentication error, login error, whatever you want to call it. Okay, authentication error. Return res render auth login, not auth register. Auth login. The title is login. It's login message, right? And this is good. So this closes off this, right? This closes off this. And this closes off this. And now we need this, right? Because of Visual Studio Code, actually. Visual Studio Code is killing me, right? No, it's changing my stuff, which is good and not good, right? That should work. But however, in the past, when I had a failure redirect and a failure flash and a success redirect, it took over those. We may have to come back here and try this again. Let's try this, and I may have to come back here and fix this problem. By the way, let's check and see if I'm still connected. Yes, I am, right? And let's try this out. So if I go back to login, so my register page works. If I go to login, and if I try to log in with this guy, who I don't know, if I click login, I should get a login request, but I'm getting this weird cycling thing, which is bad. That shouldn't work. I shouldn't do this, right? So either this is wrong or this is wrong. So let's try and do, so what happens if there's no error? Like if on error, then do something, right? But what about if there's no error? If I came back to this, maybe there isn't, it's not an error thing. It's just what happens if I come here. So, you know, there was, I don't think it detects an error here. Like, for example, maybe what I should do is see what the error is. If I come down here, what if I don't get an error? Then this part will never, ever go, and I'll be stuck in limbo forever down in here. That's another problem. So I try this out. And let's just refresh and try it again. Okay, that's not good. What happens? So null, right? There is no error. It comes back as a null, right? So that means that I don't get an error from this, and I could check with the, I'm just running a little bit late. It's like almost 4. Yeah, I may want to take a short break with you guys and then come back. But this isn't good, right? Because if you look at this thing, I'd like to put the error in play. I'd like to do this, but there isn't any error, and this doesn't detect. This is just a callback for anything. It always comes to this, right? So what we could do is we can say that, well, you know, what if there wasn't an error? What if it's not tracking errors? But instead of tracking errors, what it actually does is, what the heck? There's no error. Sorry. However, it does do a callback. I don't care about this. So I don't care about this part. Right? I just need to do a console log, some kind of error, right? And instead of assuming that it's going to be an authentication problem, just connect this flash and take me back. Let's see if it does this, just this part. But that means every time I log in, it'll do that, even if it's successful. But let's see if I'm right. So save, check if it's okay. It is. Go back, log in. No, I won't even do that. So let's see what I got. It says unhandled promise rejection warning. Reference error, rec is not defined. Rec is not defined. Oh, that's because rec is not defined. There is no rec. All right, so there is no request flash, so this is going to fail. Which means that maybe this is request response and next. And if that's true, then if I go back and if I log in, then it would give me the right error, but it's not, which means there's more errors. It says that an unhandled promise type error request flash is not a function, which means that it's something else. Nice try. It was a nice try, but it's a fail. So that's what I wanted to do, but it's not really going to work. Right? So, I mean, this is how I really want it. I want to click login, and if it doesn't log in, it shows like failed to log in. But I got to figure that out. It's stupid. I'm telling you, it's something really dumb for me to enable this to work. But it's not there yet. Okay, so let's take a short break. It's like almost 4. We have about an hour and a half left. And what I want to do with the rest of the hour and a half, which is way more time than what we had before, is I want to do 2 things. I want to, when we come back, I'm going to protect my contact list page. So you can't get to it unless you're logged in, right? And I want to create my navigation bar to show me if I'm logged in or logged out, and a login and log out link, okay? And that's what I want to do. I'll come back to you in a sec, okay? I will push it to GitHub too.